Dev mode is here. It is officially out of beta, and I'm going to tell you, it is a pretty spicy deal. We're going to take a look at dev mode today. What is it? What can it do? Why should you care as a designer? And how's it going to help your developer friends for you to be best friends? We're going to take a look at all that right now. What is dev mode anyways? Why does it matter? That's for developers, right? That's for engineers, those code types. It has nothing to do with me as a designer. Incorrect. It has everything to do with you as a digital designer. If you are like me, somebody who makes websites, applications, mobile and web-based applications, and at some point, inevitably, you're going to be handing off your designs to engineers and development teams, and that handoff process really matters. So what is dev mode? Dev mode is a new way to interact with your Figma files that's specifically geared and designed for engineers. Now, don't let that confuse you. Just because it's geared towards engineers doesn't mean that it's not a super big deal for you as a developer. So today we are going to unpack some of the basics, some of the normal stuff, some of the cool stuff, and some of the absolute coolest stuff about dev mode. But first, we're going to answer the big question of who can use dev mode. Well, if you are a designer and you have access to dev mode, right? Your normal Figma design, no matter whether you're a professional, organization, or enterprise, you have to have a paid account of Figma to have access to it, but all designers will have access to dev mode. But if you want to just have a development only seat, that's right, you can have such a thing as a development only seat to Figma. They don't need access to do design work. They just need access to the dev mode. That's going to happen on an organization or enterprise plan. Now, some people might say that seems really unfair. Everything should just always be free. And here's the deal. That is dumb. Things shouldn't always be free because dev mode, as you're going to see here in a second, brings a ton of value, I think, to that developer and designer handoff process. It's going to be worth those extra few bucks per seat per month, especially at that organization level. It's going to help in a massive way. Let's talk about the basic stuff first. Let's get the basic stuff of dev mode out of the way. And one of those things is inspecting design. So I'm here inside of a Figma file. I can move up to the top right hand corner and I can turn on dev mode, or I can hit Shift D and that will turn on dev mode. Just toggle that thing on and off. You'll notice we no longer have that design, prototype, and inspect. It's all tucked behind dev mode now. So we turn dev mode on and it doesn't really seem like we're getting a whole lot of anything right now, but we have the canvas selected, so we're able to set some global settings, right? Do we want this in CSS? Do we want it to be in iOS, Swift, Android? And we have a bunch of other options down below. Let's stick with CSS since this is a website or web application. That's fine. And we can even do unit of measurement. There's also a place for you to add some development resources like a Jira ticket or a GitHub repo or whatever it is. You can pop those in there. We'll see more about those later. But let's start doing the very basic thing that you should ever be able to do in some sort of inspect mode, which is inspect, right? I can actually click on an item and you can see that I'm immediately getting access to some measurements, right? So for instance, I can click on this text and I'm seeing like details about that text. We've seen this stuff before, right? We get a little bit about the, you know, like the contents of that element, right? Like sizes. You can hover over things and see this icon over here is 9.5 and 8. So you're getting measurements, height, width, distance, padding, margin, all that kind of stuff. It's super basic stuff, right? The same inspect we've always had in most other modern design tools, but it's there for you. You can kind of hover over things and make that happen. But this is going to drastically change when you set things to be marked for dev. You'll notice that this section or this area up here has been marked for dev, and I can either turn that off or turn it back on. What's really great about this is when your engineers come into this dev mode, they're not going to see all of your layers over here and all the different frames, all the different artboards or whatever. They're just going to be directed towards the things that are set and marked as ready for development. And what's great is they can click on it and it takes it right to them. We can jump over the welcome screen, over to the shop screen, and now they can finally just focus on what they need to focus on. That is inspecting and marking things as ready for dev. We can also, we talked about this a second ago, but we can see things like all the margin and padding. I can click in between these areas and see that we have padding there, but you'll notice on some of these, we're getting a little bit cooler here. We have some more advanced features. If you're using variables inside of your project, you can now see those variables designated as the spacing, right? So instead of 12 pixels or whatever it is, we're getting our new spacing variable of small, okay? And maybe there's some other ones here that like we get that is set to auto. This is super helpful for our developers, right? Because now they can access a series of variables, stick with those variables, and they don't have to keep re-implementing 12 pixels, 16 pixels. They just get to use the variables, which is super helpful. Now, of course, you always have the last of the basic stuff, kind of cool, kind of basic, but we can click on any element and you can actually head over to the right-hand panel and let's just click on this element right here. We're going to get some sort of box model with some spacing. And if you want to, you can actually just copy or, you know, press shift to copy everything. Boom, we've copied that to our clipboard. And now we can take that and paste that into our code base. Pretty cool, but let's talk now about some cooler stuff. The first one we actually already kind of talked about, which is dev resources. We can click on not just the entire site or project, but we can click on individual elements and we can actually add dev resources over in the right-hand panel. So you can see I can zoom in and there it is again, an opportunity for me to add a Jira ticket, GitHub, like whatever it is, it can all get pasted in right there. I don't have one, so I'm going to skip that, but this is pretty cool because it allows you to start pinpointing elements from your project management software, from your code base that's set up in GitHub or wherever, and those link directly into the Figma file to that specific spot, and that is super helpful. Another thing that I find very, very cool is the new measurement option. So you can see in the top left-hand corner, we have the ability to jump over and actually do some measurements. This is going to allow us to build out red lines directly in dev mode. They're only visible in dev mode, and here's what I mean by building out some red lines. Instead of, you know, hovering over everything, it might be nice just to see the distance from this text to the button if that's something we needed. I can hover over this little area, this little line on the right-hand side, and I can draw a measurement from there to there. And when I let go, boom, I have a measurement, right? I can do the same thing for this side. I can do it from top to bottom. So I can start to build out these red lines inside of my design. Let's just be a little bit more careful about that last one like there. There we go. So we have some measurements. And again, when we turn dev mode off, they disappear. I don't have to worry about them bogging down my design file. But when I turn dev mode on, there they are, and it is very helpful to see. All right, now let's talk about some of the absolute coolest features of dev mode, in my opinion. Some have been available since the beta release, and some of them are brand spanking new. In my opinion, one of the absolute coolest things you can do now inside of dev mode is not just measure, but in the top left-hand corner, you can turn on annotations. So this means I can grab any element that I'm working on, like for instance, this card. And you can see as I hover over, I get this little annotation cursor. It could be over the individual button, over the text, but I'm going to grab the entire card, this vertical card, and I'm going to go ahead and click. And this is going to allow me to start adding annotations to this individual element. Let's add a property. I'm going to do height. I'm going to do width. I'm going to do direction of the auto layout. I'm going to do alignment of the auto layout. Let's set the gap, which is, by the way, using a variable. That's super amazing. And then let's even put the name of the component in there. Let's press, we can even add a custom annotation here if we want to. But when we press enter, we have now created a new annotation that lives on the design. And when I turn dev mode off, it disappears. It doesn't bog down my design file. I turn dev mode back on. There it is. Now my engineers can actually look at this entire element, this entire layout or annotation, and see all the details at a glance. This is absolutely phenomenal because when we're redlining, we used to have to make separate redline files. Now we can do all that redlining and that annotating directly on the file and just put it and tuck it away inside of dev mode. Now it's important to notice that devs are going to have access to these. They can create properties. They can create all these annotations as well as designers. So just keep in mind that both have access to this suite of tools like measurement and annotations. Another amazing feature, I think it's one of the coolest things in dev mode, is the ability to compare changes. When I head over to my file, you can see I've selected an element, any sort of component or design thing that I'm using on my screen, and in the top right hand section, I get a bunch of options. It's showing me the component I'm using. It's telling me that the instance overrides the color and text defined by the component. I want to see what those differences are. We can go ahead and compare changes. If there was previous versions of this component or this element, we could see those changes. We're just going to see the difference or the diff between the main component and the instance here. And it's going to tell me in the top left-hand section. I actually don't have to tell. I don't have to guess what it is. I can see the image has changed, the product name, all of these elements have changed. I can click on them and it's going to take me right to it. No more hunting and pecking for our developers trying to figure out what has changed. We can actually just see all of it right there. So pretty amazing. Another one of those features that I'm absolutely in love with is the ability for my developers to use the component playground. They can actually open up any instance or tap any instance of a component that we're looking at, and they can jump down here and see all the full documentation. It appears in all these different sizes. They get a little visual overview. They can even click here and it's going to take them directly to the main component. And we can also at any time open these up in the component playground. This is going to give them access to see how all the differences and changes might take place. So for instance, they can see, is a favorite, isn't a favorite. We can actually zoom back out and go to another component, open it in the playground. When we open this playground up, we get to see all the different versions. So we get to see the medium version, the small version, large. We can actually start typing in different things here and see that play out. Or we could have gone back, changed like all the text inside. Is it a favorite? Is it not a favorite? All of these things happening inside of the playground. That is super helpful. Another one of the coolest features of Dev Mode, which has been there since beta, is the ability to use plugins in your workflow as a developer. Now, this might not matter a whole lot to you as a designer, but to your engineers, they're going to love the ability to move over from Inspect over into plugins. They can actually hit something like maybe Figma to code, and they get to see a lot of content and details. Do they want to see it in HTML, Tailwind, Flutter? They get all of the visualizations of the component, and we get to see it like built as a widget, a full app, or a snippet. They can actually copy all of this code, take that with them, and they get access to the colors that are being used inside. This is a super helpful kind of like addition, but there's a lot of other really great plugins. If your workflow or your team uses Anima or Firejet, or maybe you use something like Builder.io, you can bring any of these plugins into your workflow. There's a whole community of developer plugins that are being created for this purpose. It's an absolutely outstanding addition. One of the greatest features, in my opinion, is this last one I want to talk about, and that is the ability for developers to open things up directly in VS Code, which is the large majority of developers' primary tool as they are coding and building out their projects. And again, this is probably not a big deal to a lot of designers, but to developers, it is all the things. It is a very big deal. I can see that I'm working on a project here. I can zoom in. I'm in Dev Mode. I can select the entire section or an individual screen or design. I can go to the top right here and say open up in VS Code, and look at that, it has jumped me right over to VS Code because I have the Figma plugin set up inside of VS Code. You can see that that Figma plugin is available now over here. I get all sorts of things like notifications, access to all my projects. It's going to be linked directly to any sort of GitHub repo or any sort of connected, like area. And what's great about this is we can click on these elements and we start to get direct feedback over here in the bottom left-hand section. So you can see I can even pull this up a little bit more. Let's click on things like this nav bar or this chart. We get all the layout. You get access to things like properties, components, dev resources, assets, plugins. All of it is happening directly here. You can switch over from CSS to iOS, Android, all the different integrations. I don't want to get into it super crazy, but I will say that it's pretty stellar. And at any time, if they want to see this specific design, they can just hit open in Figma, and we're going to go ahead and do that. It's going to pop me over to Figma, and it's going to open it up here in the browser, but it's going to then direct me straight back over to where that design was. Bam, we are so connected as designers and developers because of Figma Dev Mode. I'm a huge fan. These are cool features. You should definitely try out Figma's Dev Mode and encourage your teams to be using it. I think it's going to be very helpful for handoff and delivery and collaboration between design and development teams. Well, that's it. Those are some of the coolest features of Figma's new Dev Mode. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. I do a lot of videos about design and code sometimes, just like this one. So stick around by hitting that bell notification icon. Also, if you want more content, check out the videos over here, and I'll see you in the next one.